Welcome to Marketecture, where you can get smart fast with in-depth interviews of leading technology vendors. I'm Mike Shields, and I'm here with Corey Munchbach. She's the CEO of BlueConic. Hey, Corey, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
What does your product do now? How does it work exactly?
So one of the things that I think, depending on who you talk to, there's like a very basic sense of like, what does the CDP need to have? It needs to have a database where you can actually store data. You need to store customer data in particular, and specifically profiles of an individual. You're actually creating, whether you want to call it a golden record or a 365. I think there's a lot of buzzwords around this that don't service anyone in this industry, if we're being honest with each other. But like conceptually, you have this record about a consumer that has the relevant data that you need as a marketer to understand who they are, how they're engaging with you, what they've done in the past, what they're doing now. And then all of that data that exists in that database then needs to have a user interface on top of it where you can create segments. You can decide where the data needs to go for orchestration. You need the data to be able to do some amount of analytics, whether that's, propensity and sort of other machine learning type of understanding, but even just clustering, kind of cohort analysis, right? That sort of stuff. Again, all in service of how do we interact with you as the consumer, right? One of the things that's challenging about the CDP space is that some index much more on the movement of the data, some index more on the analytics along with it, and others index more on sort of the activation, the downstream. But fundamentally, if you're not collecting the data from a lot of different sources, storing it in a profile that's tied to a consumer ID and making it available for that type of activation, that's the core of it. For us, what that looks like at BlueConic is a Apache Cassandra database. And I bring that up because we're, to my knowledge, the only ones that use that technology that we chose in the first place because it's super fast read and write. So our orientation toward marketers who need things to happen in milliseconds when you're interacting on the website or in the app. That's why we chose Cassandra for that reason. And then we use a lot of great Apache software, Node, all kinds of other best-in-class things for the segmentation, the analysis, the pluggable connections, things like that, that then allow you to ship all that data to wherever it needs to go and create that closed loop between the interaction and the insight that the marketer is kind of generating as the consumer moves through that journey, whatever that looks like.
And a couple of questions. You mentioned the CDPs tend to skew one of the three ways. I think you're saying you're built to skew all or to cover off on all those use cases.
We all have to do a little bit, right? I think it's the same thing with a marketer, right? It's really hard not to have some blending overlap. I think the question ends up being like, how far into any of those competencies do you go? I think maybe a little bit more of like a major minor type of concept. We've always been really focused on the activation side of things, right? So the data being able to make its way to your email platform or to your website for personalization, right? Sort of that downstream side of things. So you can do stuff with it and take actions. Exactly. So that's sort of our major, if you will, while you have to be able to be reasonably good at some of the other stuff in service of that is kind of how I think about it.
Who are your customers? I'm assuming, are we talking mostly big brands, retailers, media companies?
A combination for sure. You kind of nailed it. So, the problem that we're solving is inherently one of complexity. Consumer data is crazy complicated. It's coming in at high volume, at high velocity, at lots of variety of data types, et cetera. And so we tend to work very well with sort of those upper mid-market and enterprise brands who have a huge amount of complexity in their businesses. So we are super privileged. We work with customers like Colgate and Mattel, Molson Coors, UEFA is a big customer of ours. So more on the sports side of things. Hearst is a big customer of ours as well. So we really run the gamut. One of our kind of sweet spots is in what I call kind of the multis, companies that tend to have multiple brands, multiple regions, and sort of figuring out like, what is the data governance here? How is there overlap between brands, right? VF is a wonderful customer of ours, has been for a long time. So we work differently with the North Face and with Vans and with Timberland because their customers are all different, but fundamentally kind of working off of the same operational playbook. And how do we share those insights? How do we work similarly to gain those efficiencies while recognizing that a Timberland customer engages with Timberland just really differently than an Ultra customer does. Right. And so that tends to be really our extra sweet spot on top of kind of what you described, the bigger brands across a number of different verticals.
So presumably this is not a small business thing. You need to have a lot of data and a lot of products probably, or a lot of MarTech that you need to make this worth your while.
To be a fit for BlueConic, certainly, going back to your point about, there's CDPs that service a lot of different sides of the world. There's some that are going to solve the problem descriptively very similarly, but maybe are a better fit for SMB. But yeah,
Right.
we're looking at, customers with tens and hundreds of millions of records, lots of volume on their website, and just having to navigate that in a way for them. The way I think about it is the complexity of their data and the complexity of using that data, if you're a marketer, is an operational pain point, right? It's inhibiting their ability to grow the business. That needs to be a certain threshold before, you start to become a great fit for
That's not
us.
an issue for the local plumber for the most part.
Not so much.
Thanks for listening. To hear the complete interview, subscribe at marketecture.tv.